Howdy, all of you delicious people. I'm here today to review Red Dawn from 2012. So, immediately I have to say 2012 because there is original Red Dawn, of course, that has like Patrick Swayze and Charlie Sheen and a number of other characters in it. I do remember that movie, and I can kind of tell you how I can remember that film. The only thing that I actually remember from the original film, because it's been a very long time since I've seen the original, the way in which that all the people are to be parachuting down is right around the same time where all the kids are in school. And all of a sudden, one of the teachers decides, well, hey, like, I'm going to go out there and see what's going on. And all of a sudden, the kids, after they see what happens with their teacher, they decide to go on and rush out of this school to drive the heck out of here, to scramble and to go on and go in some part of town to get an exchange of clothes so they can go on and try to like get the heck out of there. I think in the early stage of the movie, I think they end up getting like bows and arrows rather than actual guns. But like, I guess in this movie we just have it where it's like, well, it makes a lot more sense for these characters to have guns than like bows and arrows, simply because like technology has much more advanced within the time of which they've done this movie, so it makes a lot of sense. But anyways, so we go into this movie, and I thoroughly, and I mean thoroughly, enjoy this film. Really, there's so much heart in this film. There really is just, like, that whole speech to kind of make people connect with what the cause of what they're doing is just so, like, it's kind of a very, like, it's not easily quotable. Because, yeah, it's easy, and it's hard, and and like in decisions, and like there's a whole lot of moving parts going on with that speech. But really at the tail end of the speech, like it really starts to hit home uh with what they're kind of saying here, to where they have to go on and reiterate that speech to everybody, because that's to be like uh, their consistent, like, this is going to be the best way to connect everybody. And like, I think that's kind of like the fascinating part about this film, the connection of a town to just like, no, like, we're not just going to go on and let this invading force take our town. It's not going to happen. Like, so really that's kind of the teeing up part of this movie. And so we have, of course, our characters. We find out that Josh Peck, who plays Matty in this movie, even though his name is actually Matt, they say Matty a lot, or I think really just Jed calls Matt Matty a lot. So I might call Matt Matty a lot just because I hear it through most of this film. So, but Matty, of course, is to be this kind of football character, and he's quarterbacking uh, for of course this school that are the Wolverines. It's kind of funny when, because I was just listening recently to Inside of You with Michael Rosenbaum, which is a YouTube thing, and he had Josh Peck on there, and he was mentioning how really it's kind of like fascinating to think like what happiness would probably be like the quarterback, or like any number of people who are like the popular kids and stuff like that, who would get everything in life and this and that, and how easy that would probably become for any number of those people. Uh, and we have Matt, who technically is the quarterback for this school, because of course he is, because he of course is one of the like lead characters here, out of a number of people within this ensemble cast. So we of course have this movie be about this town that all of a sudden gets invaded by, I believe, North Korea. But once we get further on into the movie, all of a sudden there's a number of things that start just kind of getting in the mix to where it's like it seems like North Korea is attacking, but then all of a sudden in the later part of the movie we get like uh, Russians being incorporated and possibly Chinese incorporated, and like it seems like we have a number of people that are to all go on and like kind of help out, uh, going on and taking down what of course to seemingly be a good portion of the United States, because we have Jeffrey D. Morgan, who of course later appears in this film. He kind of breaks down Sergeant Major Andrew Tanner, is to kind of break down um, a little bit more about how things are going on. Because if you've never seen the original, there's like a whole like uh, later act in here where we start to involve certain interesting characters. So with that said, yeah, like just kind of teeing it up for people, like, but if you've probably seen the original and you've also probably seen this one, because why wouldn't you? It's a really great movie. Um, and like it's like surprising how this took me so freaking long to go on and watch this film. But there's a lot of great movies out there that I'm just going on and I'm just like, uh like like there's a number of like movies that I have on a list, or I've done like pre-done thumbnails and pre-done things for, and so there's a huge hefty list of stuff that I still just haven't been able to thumb through yet, simply because like there's new releases that come out or stuff that just kind of gets in the way, or there's like undeniable stuff that I just need to watch for my own self purposes, and then things just get lost in the shuffle. So, so yeah, this is a great movie, and it's kind of great also that this movie doesn't copy and paste from the original deal or the original film, and so yeah, I think that's all that I want to go on and say. I think it'd be pointless just to go on and say more. So easily a great film. Um, so with that said, let's just go on and double five this up. Let's just go on into spoilers so we can go out of our way to say that it is spoiler time, spoiler time. It's about the time again to spoil this movie. I don't know what it is. You would think a thing that I've done a million bajillion times at this point, like you would never F that up. But you would be wrong. You would think spoiler time would be an easy thing to just go into. But again, you'd be wrong. So let's go into it. So the beginning of this movie, we have it being focused upon this football game, and like this whole entire town is at this football game. And like if I would have probably been thinking that wouldn't this be kind of like the best or perfect time to probably have those like parachutes be coming down. I'm like, this is probably it. Like this football game that all of a sudden, like, because we have a ton of people all at this town, but like, I like the fact that it isn't like perfectly choreographed and it just kind of feels like these guys randomly come in. So we of course have Matt that is going and shotgunning, and he's of course the quarterback for the school. And we of course have Erica, who's Matt's girlfriend, who is the cheerleader. I'm like, man, like, don't they have this, like, all perfectly planned out and whatever, where we have it where all these, like, characters have to have these, like, certain, like, Matt's the quarterback and Erica's the cheerleader, and, like, we have so many characters that are just like, really? Like, they're going to be those people for this film? But anyways, so... And we also conveniently have it where, like, Matt and Jed's father is, like, the guy who is to be, like, the sheriff for this town. Or a sergeant, Tom Eckert, for this town, of course. So... we, of course, have Matt, who's getting, like, the coach, Coach Dolan. I think it's Dolan, who's kind of telling him, like, okay, like, you're shotgunning far too much. You should go on and, like, try to get somebody run out of bounds. Because, of course, like, time is running out. The score, of course, is 14-17. Wolverines are losing right now. So, Matt, of course, is to go on and kind of be very bullheaded. And it seems like he, of course, is to want the ball. Matt's scrambling. It seems like we just aren't able to get our characters to, or what am I saying here? We're not getting Matt to be able to do the right thing to win this game simply. And so the coach takes it into his own hands and he's like, hey, bring out the field goal team. We need, like, we're just going to tie it up. So all of a sudden we have the field goal team that comes out to try and tie it up, and they miss the field goal, and now they've lost the game. Matt, I think, was, like, talking smack to one of the opponent's guys, and so all of a sudden now Matt, who I guess has quickly changed out of his gear and is now in, like, street clothes. I'm like, man, that's kind of fast considering, like, all of the, like, the visiting team is to, like, drive off with this bus. I'm like, what, did they give these guys time to, like, change into their street clothes, which doesn't make sense? Because for, like, especially for a away team, like, a away team would never go on and, like, have a spare change of clothes. Like, because I've played football a year or two or whatever. Was never really good at it, but I was an existing person there. So, and I just thought that was kind of weird. I'm like, man, like, they quickly changed these characters really fast. So Matt, of course, is hearing this one guy just boasting upon the school bus, like, hey, man, like, thanks for letting us go to finals. Do you want a ticket? And Matt's like, yeah. And so they go on, they leave. Matt is to, even though he's to lose the game, he, of course, to have Erica as this kind of like, well, like, here's your consolation prize. So Matt goes on and is talking to Erica, and Erica is consistently, like, hitting Matt, and Matt's like, God, like, when is this going to be, like, fun for me? Like, to... Because this may just be, like, the introduction for both of these characters, or, like, there's a lot of times where weirdly, like, movie parts are kind of, like, filmed out of place, And so there's certain kind of like introductions of certain characters that takes weirdly in different places. And so it's like, okay, we're getting introduced with these characters, but this is probably like their last thing that they probably did at the end of filming, or kind of somewhere in between. It's weird and wonky how we uh, do movies where you would go on and you would kind of like think that this is like their first time together, but you would be weirdly wrong. So Jed, who is Chris Hemsworth, Jed is to be at this bar location place of a thing, and so Jed is talking to two other guys. Uh, the guys are of course asking Jed. It's like, well, hey, like, you were in the service, you were in the army, uh, yeah, like, where were you at? And they were thinking that he was in like California, and Jed's like, no, I was in Iraq. And I was like, oh, okay. Like, these guys are asking him all these like goofy questions. Like, I would immediately just been like, well, hey, like, where were you service exactly? Um, like, I would go on and like, hey, this is really interesting. But like, I think Jed like really doesn't give a crap about like catching up with anybody. Like, cuz Jed is probably just going to go on and just like get out of there, and probably just go on to another tour, or go on to just kind of do uh something else military wise. But anyways, because like we just have Jed who's kind of temporarily at home, so because Jed doesn't, I guess, even have his own like room, to where he's just kind of sleeping on the couch in this film. So, anyways, let's go back to the movie. So all of a sudden, Tony, of course, is noticing Jed is back in town, and for Tony, it seems that Jed is the one that got away. Where in the later part of the movie, we have Tony and Jed talking about this story about a girl named Laura, who, of course, was making out with Jed, while Tony, of course, was to have food sickness, and she, of course, was like barfing out of her tent the whole night that they, I guess, went camping at some point. So, and Tony, I guess, had copied Laurie's haircut, and Jed never really noticed. So, uh, so Jed goes on, and I don't think we really have both Jed and Tony kind of talk to one another. But Tony just notices Jed exists. So Matt is to also make his way to this same location, this same uh, bar, of course, and all of a sudden we have it to where all the lights supposedly go out. But we actually find out later on in the film that there was this massive like electromagnetic pulse that was to like cripple all of the like electrical things, and all of the uh, like any kind of source of real like power and whatever, like knocking out the phone lines and everything. To where, of course, we have the military force from North Korea that supposedly comes in here. And I want to reiterate this. It's not just North Korea. It's just an easier thing to say here, because in the later part of the movie, we have any number of people that kind of come in here. We have Russians, we have Chinese soldiers that kind of come in here and are to go with the North Koreans. So if I'm just saying the North Korean army, it's really just because it's quicker, it's easier. Um, or if I'm just to say like the military force, that kind of just means whoever is to be going up against the heroes of this film, because technically we have Jed saying that the Wolverines are technically the bad guys, which is like, well, that's true because technically, when really looking at it, like when you have this military force just coming in and they quickly like take everything out, and the Wolverines are kind of uh, the smaller portion of people compared to this larger thing. It's kind of like David versus Goliath. Then yeah, like I guess you would probably consider these guys the bad guys in this case, trying to create chaos, as they say in this movie somewhere. But let's get back to it. So we have Jed going on, and Maddie and everybody's like, hey, like I think we should just go on home. Um, really, uh, we of course, since the power is going off, we might as well go home anyways. And so everybody just goes on home. It seems that Tom is to go on and kind of try to prevent any looting from going on because of this blackout. So Jed and Matt are, of course, making their way back home. We, of course, have Jed talking to Matt. It's like, hey, man, do you want a beer? We find out that both of these characters are so distant from one another simply because Jed was to leave for almost a decade. It was like 8 years after Jed's mother had died. Well, both Matt and Jed is his mother. My bad. So Jed's going to supposedly sleep on the couch. Matt, of course, still has his room, so on and so forth. So we have a moment where Matt is going on and opening this fridge, and he kind of leaves the door open, and he's grabbing some like drink out of it, and Jed's like, hey, what are you doing? And Matt's like, what? Jed's like, well, like, you're leaving the fridge open, the power's out. And Matt's like, well, yeah, and I got what I needed. And so he closes the thing, and I'm like, God, like, Matt's gonna be the one who just, like, doesn't take rules from anybody. Like, he drums to his own, uh, like, what is the perfect analogy? Uh, he whistles to his own tune, let's just say, and no other tune will go and counteract that. It's a very goofy analogy, but it is what it is. So, really nothing happens after this. We just kind of transition to have them wake up the next day to go on and find out that all of a sudden all this military force is dropping, parachuting in. And now that these guys are, of course, noticing that people are basically falling from the sky, there's a number of planes that are getting destroyed here. So I think we want to, like, kind of question, like, how exactly this would legitimately be able to happen. Would there be so easy a case that would just say, like, you know what, like, there's no way that this could happen. Like, this movie kind of goes on and is to say, like, something like this would happen, like, just people falling out of the sky. But you also just kind of look at a number of, like, cases uh, where a lot of things like were caught unaware and with their pants down, sadly. And so you're like, well, like I guess this could have actually really happened. So, anyways, pushing on. So, Jed, of course, is to wake up Maddie and tell him, like, hey, we gotta go and find Dad. Like, we need to get the heck out of here. So, they're driving along crazily through this town to the point of, like, F roads at this point. Like, they're driving through people's yards, and I'm like, oh my god, this is so crazy, but this is so awesome. Maddie at one point is telling Jed there's a pool over there. Like, come on, like, so they're driving through all these fences, and it's crazy. Of course, Maddie is to find Erica, like, being taken by this military force, and there's nothing they can do. Uh, we have, like, Robert, and we have Daryl, who, of course, and Danny at one point, who is to kind of, like, all, like, jump into certain people's car. We have a car with Pete and Julie and Greg, who are kind of driving behind these guys. So at one point we have, of course, where Jed and Maddie are to see their father, and so Tom, of course, is telling his sons, like, hey, follow my batukas, follow my rear. And so all of a sudden, like, we have these guys kind of following Tom. All of a sudden, Tom is to lose the ability to drive his car because he's taking heavy fire. All of a sudden, we have this one parachuted man that, of course, is to kind of fall right in front of this guy. Jed is to smash into his own father's car so that way it takes out this parachuted man. And so we have Tom getting out of his car and, like, telling him, hey, like, you guys need to go on and make it to the cabin. Like, just get out of here. Like, I'll try and help out these people. You just go. So these guys are to all now trying desperately to make it to this cabin. And we immediately have Jed here, who's kind of telling and giving, like, chores for everybody to start doing. Robert is to go on and try to figure out, like, the TV, radio, like, what's really going on. Try to figure that out. And we have a number of other people that are going and cleaning out the kitchen for a number of food. And everybody else is trying to figure out where all the guns are, all the weapons are, all the rifles, all the handguns, and everything like that. Pete, of course, is to take one of these handguns and put it back into the back of his pants. And so we push on here. And so it seems like most is to all be safe. And I immediately realized that I said something. Because even at one point, Danny didn't go with these guys so early. We find both Danny and Tony later on. So, my bad. We also had the moment where Jed, of course, was having to meet up with Captain Cho and try to smash right into his military vehicle, and, like, that took out a number of Captain Cho's men, with Cho also being in that vehicle. Because Maddie was telling, of course, Jed that this military, like, Humvee or whatever was coming up, and there's nothing Jed could do. Like, he has to go on and ram into these guys because that he has to go on and, like, chase, like, kind of like he has to go and smash into these guys so that way their car isn't drivable. So, but anyways, pushing on. So we have both Tony and Danny who are to arrive in this other kind of like truck of sorts, and Jed is to go out into the forest while Jed is to tell Maddie to turn off all the lights in the house, and Jed is kind of waiting forever for Maddie to turn off all the lights and to tell everybody what to do. So Jed then goes on and is to realize who's in this car, and so Jed is like, oh, okay, just kind of make it to our cabin here. And all of a sudden we have Pete, who whips out his handgun and is starting to fire, and so now Jed's ticked off. He's like, hey, like, stop firing. This is one of us. And Pete is just like, well, I thought they got away from you. And Jed's like, really? Like, get away from me of all people? I'm the only one here that's really military trained, is what I would kind of be thinking in my brain. So Jed's like, you know what? How about you hand over me the gun, Pete? Just hand me over the gun. And the guy's like, no, you're not going to get my gun. So we have Jed that just knocks Pete down, takes the gun from him, and he's like, okay. Like, Pete gets up, Jed's like, you want some more? And Pete's like, no. It's like, oh, okay then. Like, problem resolved. I wouldn't be trusting, honestly, anybody with these guns. I would just be like Rambo. There'd be like 30 guns like everywhere on my body somewhere. And then they would probably accidentally go off while I'm trying to sit down. And stuff is going like... Because when looking at it, you would think of this situation as like a video game where you're thinking at any point in moment that somebody's just going to go on and just be so tempted to just kill you for whatever goofy reason. So, Tony, of course, is to ask about Erica, who is her sister, and Matt is to mention that they took her, because, of course, he saw them taking her, and there was nothing they could do. So, cue them going on into the next day. So now, Jed is to wake everybody up, mentioning that Pete had gone on and scrambled and took all the food and all the supplies and stuff, but the guns are still there. So they come to find out that also the military is to have gone on and found where they were. So now all these guys are kind of scrambling in the woods somewhere, trying to hide out. And so now all of a sudden we have both Sergeant Tom here, and we also have Mayor Jenkins, who is actually Daryl's father, is to try and figure out a way to talk to his kids. Really, we have the mayor who's kind of trying to get these kids to, like, hey, come on, guys, just come on out. Let's align ourselves with with, of course, Commander Cho here, or Captain Cho here, because, like, yeah, like, we should just do what he says. And so the mayor is also talking to his son, and so after that whole thing is over, after that kind of rigmarole, and we kind of have Daryl, who's kind of torn between his dad and also, like, between, like, what's going on, and I understand that. So all of a sudden, Sergeant Tom is to come on. He takes this megaphone, and instead of going on and saying, like, hey guys, like, yeah, like, We're buddies now. Come on down. No. Sergeant Tom is defiant, and I really appreciate that. So, and plus also, we had Tom who was telling Maddie that he was proud of him, and like before uh, when Matt uh, was of course to lose that game, but it's like, hey, it doesn't matter. Like, I'm still proud of you. So we had Sergeant Tom that goes on and tells his sons, like, well, hey, like, I love you, and like what you guys need to go on and do is you need to go on and go to war with this guy and kill him off. Which immediately just has the guys who are just like plow and like they kill this guy and I'm like, oh my god. But like when really looking at it, like this guy would resist anyways. We already have that feeling, sadly. Even though he has no gun, he has nothing to defend himself, he still would just be defiant to the very end. So Maddie, who is to realize his father is to be dead here, is trying to run to his father, and Jed grabs him and is kind of like putting his hand over his mouth, and it's like, you know, like he's kind of like grabbing onto him. He's like, you know what? I get how like within like the cognizance of our minds, we're thinking like Jed is to realize how tough this is, but he cannot go out there. And so like kind of just being held there is just like, hey, like I get it, like you just need like a second to just kind of like take in what happened, but like we can't do anything right now. We're just like, they don't have the weaponry, they don't have the numbers, yada yada yada. So our characters go on, and instead of going and finding some cabin somewhere, now they go on and decide that they're going in some cave somewhere and just kind of hunkering down. So, because we find out that Pete had led Captain Cho to this location, because we find out that Pete is to be a person who had aligned himself with Captain Cho and his people. So, and we find out later that there are certain people that are conspirators or people that have aligned themselves with the military. So we'll see kind of a number of those people who get killed, as well as the army force that's here. So really, we have it where the guys are kind of in this cave, kind of like kind of thinking about things, and so all of a sudden we start to have people realize that they start missing things, and like a lot of people start rattling off like the stuff that they actually are to start to miss here, as well as a number of these characters are to also start to like walk through town to try and do intel. Because we have Maddie who goes into town and he's desperately trying to find out where Erica is being held. But then he's also trying to find a number of spots that could possibly lead to these guys using explosives. Because at some point, the first real thing that they need to do is they go into town to try and find sympathizers that are to get them more substantial weaponry, but that isn't enough. We then need them to turn around and try to steal from the North Koreans to get even better guns, because Jed is to go on and test the guns that they were given by these men, and he's still just like, God, these guns are the worst. Like they'll spray and whatever, so like they're gonna get the job done, but still, it's not enough. So we get to a part of this movie, and I kind of like the swerving part of this film where like you're kind of expecting like Tony to get caught in the early stages here, but then all of a sudden you turn around and you find out like, oh, they're there and they're gonna pelt these guys with all these guns. So let's set this up. So Tony is making her way through town, and I guess she is to have possibly some weapons on her. And so she starts to run off. And so I think we also have it here where Robert is to have this skateboard that is to go off with this bomb. So, like, the skateboard was a bomb the whole time. So, but we have Tony who runs off to make it to a certain location where we have a number of all the guys start to sprout up and to start spraying all these guys. And they quickly go on and they strip all of these guys of their bullets and their and all of their stuff. And so then they go on and they find out that these guys are to have C4, and they're just kind of like chucking this thing around. Hey, yeah, hey, there's some C4, Chuck. I'm like, you're chucking around C4. Why? It's an explosive. You need a detonator to take... Yeah, I get it. But still, C4. Anyways, pushing on. So, once they have C4, they're planning on all of these explosions being done, because we have Maddie who is to take intel and is to find out that they are creating this stage to do this this speech, telling everybody, who of course is to be either a sympathizer or to be a person who's going to be forced to convert and help these people, like why they should go on and help them. So, but of course, Jed is realizing that Matt is just focused on getting Erica, and that's all he really cares about. And Jed is consistently thinking that, like, we should be a team. Like, we should all be on the same page. Because if we're not, someone's going to get freaking killed. And that's what happens. So, and I'm kind of rushing, but it is what it is with this film. Like, when really looking at it, there's a lot of stuff, especially that goes on in one fell swoop of an action sequence. Like, especially when they go on to that whole ambushing thing, I'm like, oh my god, there's so much going on here. And I don't know if I'm going to be able to, like, once we get to the big action sequences, there's a lot of stuff where I'm just like, there's a lot of stuff going on. Anyways, pushing on. So, we get to this point where, of course, they're doing this speech. They, of course, are having a number of people all there. And so the Wolverines are to decide to go on and to have a plan to use a number of explosives to take down these people. And they're starting to realize that there may be people that they're kind of taking down while they're doing this, kind of like Daryl's father, who is to be the mayor. But let me backtrack a little bit here. We also had at one point where Jed is having to convince all these people to be this Wolverine team. because Robert is possibly thinking like, well, hey, like I think I'm just gonna go on and go home. Who, of course, is Josh Hutcherson. He's almost thinking like, well, how about I just go on home? And Tony is to tell Robert that his parents are both dead, and you might as well just kind of stay on here and fight with these people because your parents are now dead, sadly. So all the motivation for you to want to go on and be this resistance. But Jed is also telling these guys, it's like, well, hey, like I've been in the military, so if anything, like this is easy for me. Like I'm going to fight. But for a lot of you, like it's too bloody to like just kind of tell you to just go on and like have me like decide for you what you should do here. Like this isn't easy. This will be hard. Blah blah blah. So, and this is to be the big speech here, where of course Jed is saying it's like, well, hey, like when you're fighting for family, it's it's a lot more to just make sense. It makes a lot more sense, and this and that. So we go on, and we have like there's so much about that frickin' speech that is just kind of like so loose and so confusing to repeat, of course. So Jed goes on. It's like, well, hey, like to these people, this is a place for us. This is our home. And so, like, that's kind of the going on thing to just kind of get everybody just kind of like, yeah, let's go on and do this. So, we find out that these guys are actually to get ambushed, to where Jed is to realize that there is a Russian guy who is to be a counterinsurgent military force. So, all of a sudden we start to realize that the enemy here has figured out the Wolverines' plan. And Captain Cho is to show one of these explosives to Jed. And Jed is like, oh my god, this is an ambush. Like, they knew all along what we're doing. So, now we have Jed and the people that he's with having to like scramble out of this building while Matt decides to go on and do his own thing, because Matt is to realize that Erica is on this bus somewhere, and so Matt goes on and tells I think it's Julie, or I think it's either Julie or Tony, to blow the explosives early so that way he can go on and catch Erica and try to untie her from this bus. And so while Matt is doing that, Greg ends up getting shot in the process. And at one point when Matt comes back to talk to everybody after getting Erica and going on his own, Jed, of course, is to tell Matt, it's like, well, hey, like, Greg died while helping you. So Matt just kind of felt awful about Greg dying, and so he kind of went away for 3 days and then came back to the group, where it seems like everybody was just kind of like, hey, like, we're glad you're here because we just need as many people as we can get. But anyways, so everybody's scrambling, and we have it at one point where Jed, of course, is like getting on top of this military vehicle, and he gets shot a couple times. Supposedly they just kind of show like he gets shot in the rib and they sew that up. But it kind of looks like he was getting like shot in the leg, and like possibly like it looks like the shots were kind of more coming from like the leg or something. It didn't quite make sense to me, but it is what it is. So we have them go on and use this vehicle to try to scramble out of here, and so most of the characters, sadly enough, besides Greg, end up getting out of here unscathed. Matt is to try and drive away with this bus, but they don't get very far. And so Matt is just taking Erica, and that's it, to just get the heck out of there. And so both Erica and Matt go to this one clothing store to exchange their clothes. And we have the store owner who helps them. And so the North Koreans find out that this one was to, of course, go on and help them. So they take her out uh, in the town street to want to go on and shoot her. But all of a sudden, we end up finding out that the Wolverines come out later and try to help that girl out, and are also going on and kind of giving people a number of weaponry and stuff like that. So like they're like, yeah, the Wolverines, and everybody's like, Wolverines, and like, yeah, like the big kind of like rousing moment in the movie where we had Robert. It's kind of funny because we had this character kind of change from him being this guy who barfs at the sight of a dead body and goes and shoots this deer and has to forcibly drink the blood. And then both Jed and Matt are telling Robert, it's like, hey, like, what does that taste like? Because neither one of us has ever drank it. And Robert's like, oh my God, like, that's not healthy. And they're just laughing. So like, we got you. So transition here. So after these guys all make it back, we of course have Matt who has Erica, and Matt is to find out that Greg is dead. Greg leaves for a number of days, and then when he comes back, we have Jed and Matt finally having it out here. And so Matt is to mention that he only left for 3 days. Jed, when their mother died, had left for 8 years. And so, but Jed's like main thing is like, well, hey, like if we're not together, like, cause like they're the only family that they have left, and so like they need to be like together, because like if one of them dies, yeah, like that's all they have. That's all they have. So, but Jed is just telling Matt like, hey, do whatever you want. Like, do what I like. He just doesn't care at this point. So Matt makes it back, and so it seems like he finally is on the same page with people. So, but there's still like, of course, the counter to everything that's going on here. So, at some point, we of course have it where these characters are to figure out, the military is to figure out where these guys are at, that they're at this cave. And so we go on and they start bombing the crap out of this cave right after both Jed and Tony are to go on and talk about their story about them camping and Tony getting food poisoning. And after all, the guys are to go on and eat a bunch of like Subway, I guess, because we have Robert who is scrambling into town, and he just kind of goes randomly into this Subway, and he's yelling at this sandwich artist, and it's kind of funny because actually for Subway, like that's what they call their people, the sandwich artist. Sandwich artist, go on and give me all this food. So they're giving him all they're just like randomly putting all that crap into this garbage bag, which I'm like, that's gotta be the worst. But when really looking at it, like, hey, freaking food is food, especially when like you're barely ever gonna have any, and they just take a whole bucket and they're just kind of pouring it into this soda. Like, man, that probably like I don't know what happened with that bucket, but anyways, so they're scrambling, and so we just see like a bunch of people just kind of randomly having like Subway sandwiches. I wonder if that was the sponsor for this movie. Probably not, because a lot of times you just like, oh no, it's just a convenient thing for the film. Because at some point we had to like show these people eating at some point. So the cave, of course, is getting bombed, which I guess leads two people to be dead at this point. And so I think that finally, like, that actually just kills off Danny here, and not quite sure what the other body was, what the other person who died was, because I don't think it clearly, easily showed. But they said that there was two people there. Maybe it might have been. Was it Julie? Might have been Julie, sadly. But anyways, so we we go on and find out that these guys are scrambling to, I guess, their second location. And that's, of course, where we bump into Jeffrey Dean Morgan, who, of course, is Sergeant Major Andrew Tanner, who is to also have a, like, two other guys who, it's kind of funny because we have Jeffrey Dean Morgan, who of course is to be like Negan from Walking Dead, the guy who of course to play Smith, who is to be one of Andrew Tanner's uh, like military or Marine guys also. Like he's from the Captain America movie, the first one, and I'm sure like he's also in a number of other things somewhere. But we also have Hodges, who of course would be played by Matt Gerald, and he's from the Daredevil show. So I'm like, a lot of guys that are just weirdly just in comic book movies or comic book shows or whatever, as well as like Andrew Tanner or Jeffrey D. Morgan being in like The Watchmen. So like either shows or movies or whichever, like all these guys are. I'm like, immediately when I saw these guys, I'm like, oh yeah, that guy's from that. I was putting the pieces together. Anyways, so we have these three Marines that were retired until this thing kind of popped off. And so, like, yeah, like, we were retired until all this happened. So, uh, because they were at this one camp, but, like, the camp is no longer there. So, Andrew up and telling them that there, of course, was this EMP that just took out everything. And so these Marines are going on and asking if these kids are, of course, to be the Wolverines because, like, they want to get with this insurgents that's kind of taking down these people. And they're like, well, hey, yeah, like, we're the Wolverines, just so you know. And Tanner's like, oh, I was kind of like, I was hoping it would be actually probably, I guess, some like people who are legitimately much more trained or whatever, but like, I'll take what I get. So Tanner's explaining what goes on or what has happened, and that there is seemingly a United States that is like a real legit home of the free, land of the brave, and whatever. Um, there is a certain kind of like pocket of the United States that is to have like regained some ground. But Tanner is to, of course, ask these guys if they have gone on and seen this certain kind of item that is to showcase how these guys can communicate to one another. And we have, of course, where Matt was to take this picture of this certain kind of phone that they had gone on and used. And so Matt conveniently has this picture of this phone thing. And he's like, yeah, like we need to go on and get that thing from them so we can try to figure out like what they're doing. Because like this is like one singular line of communication. And so if we get that thing, we can go on and figure out exactly what their strategy is, and we can take them all down. And they're like, well, hey, like, how soon do you need this? And Tanner's like, rapidly. So they go on and they find out that the police station is now being commandeered by this military force, and they are to drastically change it into their headquarters. And, like, in all honesty, it seems like these guys are to redecorate the place, and I don't really understand why. Like, we have so much time where these guys are taking these, like, shipping containers and, like, filling it all in this, like, football, like, uh, football field. I was trying to figure out the right words here because I'm like, blah. They weirdly have to like redecorate all throughout the city, where they have to have these like symbols of this alliance that's going on, this military force that's going up against the Wolverines. And so it's kind of interesting also because I forgot about this, where Jed is saying like, hey, we have to let everybody know that there is a fight going on, that there is a resistance going on. And so we have to go on and spray paint Wolverines all over the place to let them know that, like, hey, there is, like, help coming. Like, we're here for them. And I thought that that was really cool. And, like, they, of course, used the school, like, mascot as what they kind of shout, like, hey, we're the Wolverines. And I'm like, snicked. Bub. Anyways, so yeah, so what happens is that they feel like there's no way to try to penetrate into this police headquarters to go on and be able to get this certain communication device. Big fat words. So communication, yeah, that was a complicated one. Bravo to that one. Give me a little pat on the back there. Anyways, so what Jed just decides to do here is, because since it seems like this place is impenetrable, Jed just goes on and jumps from this roof, from this window, to the top of this building, and is to try to take down a number of military guys that are to be there, with the Marines kind of shooting with their silencers. And Jed kind of gets on the rooftop, and so now everybody has to go on and jump from this window to this other building. And we, of course, have Tanner that's like, I hate these kids. Like, I hate them. So here's a funny thing, though. They jump from this window to this building, and then all of a sudden we start to see that they're throwing ropes, and then people are just kind of roping down, and they're like, son of a bitch, we could have gone on, and you guys are just, like, insane. Anyways, we then go on and have these guys, like, start going through this building, because they've kind of taken out all the other guys in this one spot. So they're starting to make their way through the building, trying to be as stealthy as possible. And so the main thing is for them to try and figure out where this communication device is. And so they're kind of slowly but surely trying to make it through this place, trying to be as quiet as possible. And so, like, the Marines are kind of walking by, like, like thinking that, like, these guys may not be able to tell the difference between, like, these Marines and the North Koreans, and so on and so forth. So, because they're all wearing camouflage. So, at one point we have it where uh, there, of course, is a spot where attention is to be raised. Uh, because, of course, we have uh, these guys going on and firing bullets. All of a sudden, everybody's kind of alerted to what's going on. So, everybody's scrambling. We now have, like, the guy with the communication device who ends up falling over. And so Jed is kind of telling Maddie here to, like, hey, like, if anybody tries to scramble to grab this device, shoot them. And so Jed is going on and is to fight with Captain Cho here, which is easily, like, the best part about this film, because we all of a sudden have Jed, who has this kind of, like, chair for the shield, and he's fighting against Captain Cho, and I'm just like, Chris Hemsworth is technically Captain America right now. Weirdly, it's weird because he's like, he has this kind of shield for a thing, and I'm like, man, how, like, very rare do you actually get to see, like, Hemsworth like, kind of fighting in this way, because very rarely do you have it where, like, where Hemsworth is fighting with, like, a shielded kind of thing, because he normally, like, thinking of it, it's like Thor and a number of other movies where he just really, like, he doesn't have much as far as, like, defense goes, but we also have Captain Cho who has this blade, so it does make a lot of sense. So how this plays out here is Jet eventually gets a bullet in the shoulder, and so it seems that Captain Cho is to run out of bullets, and Jet is to conveniently be able to find his own father's desk, because we find out the badge, or we find out the like, his father's, like name badge where it has, like, his face on it, and his cuffs, and Jet is like, hey, like, you mess with the wrong family, and he shoots Captain Cho. Like, yeah, like, great payout. So we now go on and have Maddie, who is, like, scrambling to get this device and get the heck out of there. While we also had it where Tanner was telling Smith to go on and have the girls kind of bazooka their way or rocket launcher their way through a lot of the fences that are outside. And we have Robert, who kind of, like, crashes through this place with this kind of with this vehicle, and they start shooting through a number of places and spots and whatever. So they just scramble to all get the heck out of there, and so they run off to this one building that they've kind of reserved to be their hideout place. So now, of course, we get it where Jet is to praise Maddie finally for doing something right, and Jet tells Matt, he's like, you know what, I'm proud of you, and so Tony, of course, is taking Jed's beer as kind of this collateral, while Jed is going to go on and talk to Maddie, and Jed is like, he's not good with words to be able to figure out the best way to tell Matt like how he finally did something right. So Jet goes on and is to walk off to meet with Tony because she's holding his beer, and all of a sudden we sadly see Jed getting shot and getting killed. Instead of like mourning at this moment, they don't have time to do that. It's kind of like Gandalf in a way from the first Lord of the Rings, where freaking Gandalf goes down and they're like, Gandalf! But then they all have to like scramble out of there. Kind of the same thing, sadly. So they're touching onto Jed and they're just trying to get this moment, but they have to freaking leave. So Matt is telling everybody just like get the heck out of there. They're gonna blow all the explosives, and Matt is to now have to get Tony and grab her to get her the heck out of there, and like ask like Tanner if they're gonna be able to have some way to get the heck out of here. So fortunately, they're able to scramble the heck out of this place, and so at some point they are to go on and find this like station wagon, and they drive like a bat out of the heck to get out of here. And so they're like, wait a minute, how did these guys find us so quickly? And so we find out that Daryl had a tracking device on him, that they have like the Russian guys had found Daryl, had tagged him with something, and so he ran off. And so the guys didn't bother to shoot him, they just allowed him to run off. And Robert is to find out because this guy was mentioned that he got stabbed before, and Robert's like, well, wait a minute, like, you didn't get stabbed, like, you got a tracking device, like, inside of you. So they're immediately thinking, it's like, well, hey, like, is there a way to just easily cut it out? And it's like, no, it doesn't work that way. So Daryl is assigned to just take Robert's gun and let the guys drive off, so he can go on and just make his last stand while these guys are coming for them. So we turn around and we now have the communication device. They now have that. And so Tanner is telling Matt, it's like, well, hey, like, you guys can leave. Like, you guys have done more than enough. Like, you guys can go back and you can go back to the land of the free and home of the brave. You guys can go home now. And Matt's like, well, that sounds great and all, but no. So, because for them, like, this is their home. Like, they can't leave until, like, their home is safe. So, at the very end of this, we, of course, have, like, an hour and 13 minutes. This movie's like an hour and a half. Like, we're creeping on some territory here. My apologies. But luckily, we're at the end here. Well, luckily, anyways. Matt goes on and reiterates that same speech that Jed is to have, and I'm sure I'm going to F it up again. Because Matt is to say, hey, we're kids. Really, the decision is too bloody for us to make for you, but like, this isn't easy. It's going to be hard, but like, you're fighting for your family, so this is the thing that is to probably make a lot more sense. And so to them, this is a place. To us, this is our home. And like, so, like, join us if you want. So everybody's to go on and try to take down and try to save their city, and we just kind of see them at the very end of this just kind of battling on, like, yeah, let's get them, Wolverines, woo. So yeah, with that said, that's how this movie ends. Uh, didn't review it perfectly, but I just reviewed it anyways. It is what it is. Uh, People probably a number of people have probably seen this hundreds upon hundreds of times because it's a good enough movie. It has a lot of rewatchable value. So yeah. With that said, I think I'm just going to get the heck out of here so I can go on and be able to just do whatever with my day. So, anyways, bye everybody. Bye everybody.